Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 9, The Six Systems, from the Adepts in the Eastern Esoteric Tradition by Manly Palmer Hall, Part 1, The Light of the Vedas. The Six Systems. Professor Max Mueller, in his introduction to the studies of the schools of Indian philosophy, makes special mention of his admiration for the honesty which permeates the systems. Writing of the old sages and their doctrines, he says, "If they are idealists, even to the verge of nihilism they say so, and if they hold that the objective world requires a real, though not necessarily a visible or tangible substratum, they are never afraid to speak out. They are bona fide idealists or materialists, monists or dualists, theists or atheists, because their reverence for truth is stronger than their reverence for anything else." The schools which descended from the vast structure of the scriptures and their commentaries are called the Vedanta, the Purva mimamsa, the Sankhya, the Yoga, the Nyaya, and the Vaisesika. The term mimamsa, which is associated with the name of each school, means investigation, or a method for examining the revelations of the great teachers. Although the six systems are not in complete accord, it is customary to consider them as essentially complementary. The Indian scholar regards these investigations as forming an evolutionary sequence, each school advancing or unfolding the grand concept. A metaphysical, religious, and philosophical instruction is peculiar to each. The Vedic period of Indian philosophy is said to have extended from 1500 to 600 BC. During this time, the Indian systems passed through the ritualistic, theological, and spiritistic phases nearly always present at the beginning of an ethical culture. The epic period extended from 600 BC to AD 200 and is marked by the reconstruction of the religious concept. Two important reformations belong in the epic period, Jainism and Buddhism. In these schools, philosophical considerations took precedence and produced what has been called an idealistic materialism. The period of the six systems began about AD 200, and the schools originating during this period have continued to exercise a broad influence. Each of the six systems is associated with the names, lives, and teachings of celebrated sages and saints. In most cases, historical data is meager and biographies difficult to compile, but the founders were regarded as possessing extraordinary faculties and powers. According to the definition of the word adept, the illustrious men who revealed the system are entitled to be included among the initiate teachers of the Eastern wisdom. There is a curious confusion in the use of names, by which several persons have come to be extensions or manifestations of each other. As the teacher always becomes identified with his mission and the doctrine which he promulgates, it is possible that the descent of the school is implied when the sequence of sages is mentioned. The Vedanta system is based on the sutras of Badarayana. Of this master, little is known. He was referred to as a saint and is one of several ancient scholars to be identical in authority with the original work. Vedanta philosophy can be summarized in the statement, "There is nothing worth gaining, there is nothing worth enjoying, there is nothing worth knowing but Brahman alone, for he who knows Brahman is Brahman." In this usage, the term Brahman means unconditioned reality. Moksha, or salvation, is release from the tyranny of appearances, which are forever changing or passing from a present to a future state. Maya is not material illusion, but expresses relativity as distinguished from reality. Enlightenment is the acceptance, as experience, that the soul is eternally one with reality. The veil of illusion is the acceptance of that which is less than Brahman. The end of moral discipline is not the victory of right over wrong or the solution of the mystery of existence, but the experience of reality as completeness in Brahman. The sage Gaimini is intimately associated with the rise of the Purva mimamsa as a text of personal responsibility. Though not essentially a philosophical doctrine, the Purva mimamsa unfolded into a broad system involved with the discovery of the substance of duty, dharma. The word Purva means former, and the name of the school can be translated, the earlier investigation. There is no indication in this school that the world is unreal, or that individual souls are merely unenlightened fragments of totality. Duty is fulfilled by a series of observances, largely ritualistic and involving a variety of moral and ethical actions. Life itself is regarded as ritualistic, and every act performed by the human being produces an appropriate effect somewhere or sometime. Thus, salvation comes to be the consequence of a cause which is set in motion by the truth seeker. In the Sankhya system, there are evidences of borrowing from the Vedanta, Yoga, and Nyaya doctrines. Growth in all its forms is a release into manifestation of latent potentials. Thus, it must be implied that behind manifestation, there is infinite power awaiting expression. Human souls are separate and individual, and liberation is freedom from prakriti, nature. The Sankhya system may be summarized in the phrase, freedom through discrimination. The human being attains his true place in the universal pattern by recognizing the availability of superior qualities. He must work out his own salvation with diligence, even though he is substantially indestructible. The intelligent self is a spectator and remains so until it becomes absorbed in things seen, heard, or accepted through the testimonies of senses and faculties. Prakriti is active and changeable, but Purusha, self, illumines objectivity from within and is therefore able to be the solitary witness. In practical terms, the Sankhya teaches what the Neoplatonists called the victory of self over circumstance. Indian tradition advances Kapila as the author of the Sankhya system. No date is available for him, but he seems to have been a historical person. As Buddhism reveals a dependence upon his teachings, he must have lived before the middle of the 6th century BC. There are many legends about the life of Kapila, but these are confusing and contradictory. Buddhist lore connects the name of Kapila with the city of Kapilavastu in Kolasa, the birthplace of Buddha. This may be a subtle reference to the source of Buddhistic doctrine. It is not known that any works by Kapila have survived. Those bearing his name or attributed to him seem to be of more recent data. He is remembered principally as the personification of a philosophical concept. The name of Kapila and Patanjali are associated in the descent of the Sankhya and Yoga schools of philosophy. The parallel existence of the systems of Kapila and Buddha gave rise to the old quotation, "If Buddha knew the law and Kapila not, what is truth?" If both were omniscient, how could there be difference of opinion between the two? Professor Mueller was not certain in his own mind that Buddha borrowed from the Sankhya philosophy. Indian scholars are inclined to differ with this eminent German Orientalist. There is reference to the atheism of Kapila. He's supposed to have stated that there are no logical proofs to establish the existence of one God. He also taught reincarnation, and Patanjali advanced arguments against it in connection with the admission of a supreme being generally called Isvara, the Lord. It is clearly noted in the Bhagavata Purana that Kapila revived the Sankhya. This would mean that some part of the doctrine existed before his time. Such evasion of responsibility for the origination of a system of thinking is familiar throughout the Hindu religion. Everything is a revival, and sources are seldom discussed. Kapila is accepted as the founder of the Sankhya school, which was certainly based upon earlier traditions. The yoga system is best defined by comparison with the teachings of the Sankhya school. Patanjali is accredited with the authorship of the Yoga Sutras, but in this case also the teacher appears as the reviver and compiler. Patanjali is sometimes called Shesha, the divine serpent. He has been assigned to the 2nd century BC, but this would create difficulties if he actually debated with Kapila. He may or may not have been the Patanjali who was a grammarian. As this man flourished about 200 years before the birth of Christ, this may account for the confusion. A person named Vyasa, the ever-present compiler, prepared a commentary on the Yoga Sutras, but this sage could scarcely have been Vedavyasa. The original concept of yoga was a rebellion against the tyranny of the mind. True participation in reality is achieved by suppressing mental activity and accomplishing the state of samadhi. There are several yogas suitable to those of various interests and inclinations. The path of discipline is fulfilled by a series of controls imposed upon objective life, bodily structure, and the emotional and mental functions. The word yoga actually means union, but not necessarily identity with any personal conception of deity. Through the experience of samadhi, the perfect life in and of spirit is known as a transcendence of all objective processes. The yogi attains an illumination which is essentially without qualities or attributes. The end is a suspension of consciousness in undifferentiated being. The Nyaya system seems to have been integrated about 150 BC. Its basic textbook, the Nyaya Sutras, was written or compiled by the saintly logician Gautama, sometimes called Aksapada, the eye-footed, one whose eyes are directed toward his feet. This Gautama or Gautama should not be confused with the Buddha. The word Nyaya means logic, but the system so designated is not limited to the Western concept of the term and is unfolded as a complete philosophical system. The Nyaya recognizes four sources of true knowledge: perception, inference, analogy, and credible testimony. Of these, inference is the most important. There is much reminiscent of the categories of Aristotle in the development of the Nyaya syllogisms. Like the peripatetic system, this Eastern school avoids direct examination of God or first cause. Deity alone is omniscient and omnipotent, and these qualities sustain the universe. God, however, is without such attributes as lead to involvement in the existence cycle. The validity of knowledge is not self-apparent. A fact must be established by application on the plane of action. That which does not fulfill the reasonable expectancy cannot be regarded as true. Thus, the tendency to religious speculation is curbed, and non-utilitarian ideas or doctrines are passed through the sieve of discrimination. The individual is a self-motivating agent, possessing qualities which make possible the accomplishment of sufficiency. The person and the body are separate entities, and the inner life is enriched by instruction. All that is invisible or beyond conclusive definition is to be known or discovered by disciplined inference. The inevitable conclusion will be correct if the processes by which it is obtained are adequate and without error. The inductive system, later unfolded in European philosophy by Francis Bacon, is an essential part of the Nyaya school. The Vaisesika system is associated with the name of Canada, the atom eater. The names Canada, Kanabhaksa, or Kanabhuj, all with the same meaning, probably refer to the atomic speculations of this sage and are nicknames. Canada composed his principal text, the Vaisesika Sutras, between the 2nd and 4th centuries AD. It is in the cosmogony of this system that the theory of atoms is developed. The universe passes through periodic cycles of creation and destruction, or manifestation and non-manifestation. During the night of Brahma, or period of universal dissolution, the particles of the elements remain separate and dissociated. The re-emergence of the cosmos is the result of the union of souls and atoms. This union occurs first in the more attenuated elements, and the compounding continues until all structural forms are manifested. Dissolution is the reversal of this process. Complete annihilation is impossible, as all forms are ultimately reduced to atoms which are indestructible. Naturally, the overconcept leads to the development of a consistent ethical concept. The souls of human beings are individual but eternal. Though separate from each other, they are diffused throughout space. But the manifestations of soul power, apprehension, feeling, and action are limited to the bodily focus. The definition of the atom becomes also the definition of the self, and is stated as something existing, having no cause, and eternal. The keynote of the school is analysis, and its trend is toward the discovery of the particulars of the world. True individuality is considered as evidence and proof of the reality of the concept of particulars. In the words of Professor Hirayana, these 6 systems may be regarded as falling into 3 pairs: Nyaya, Vaisesika, Sankhya Yoga, and the 2 mimamsas, as the members forming each pair agree either in their general metaphysical outlook, or in their historical basis, or in both. The same author restates the important observation that it is not safe to assume that the 6 systems originated at the times when the schools were formalized. High antiquity is indicated by such references to ancient seers as occurs in the traditions of origins. Actually, the era of the sutras, a type of religious literature unique to India, was a period of reduction to written form. Older oral teachings had been carefully preserved and perpetuated from master to disciple. Originally held as too sacred to be publicly disseminated, the instructions were later made available by interpreters and reformers. The age of revelation followed naturally after the decline of the Brahmanic mysteries. It was deemed advisable or necessary to broaden the intellectual life of the people. The process was almost identical with the exposition of the Orphic theology of the Greeks. through the philosophical schools established by such initiate teachers as Pythagoras and Plato. Sir William Jones, the pioneer Orientalist, drew several interesting analogies between the 6 Indian systems and the schools of Greek philosophy. He likened the Vedanta to the Platonic sect, the Sankhya to the Italic, the Purva mimamsa to the Socratic, the Nyaya to the Peripatetic, and the Vaisesika to the Ionic. Sir William concluded that the logician Gautama corresponded with Aristotle, Gamini with Socrates, Vyasa with Plato, Kapila with Pythagoras, Patanjali with Zeno, and Canada with Thales. Even though the parallels are extremely general, the observations are interesting. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.